Two pantry items: flour and any cooking oil bond to cast iron in a way that modern non-stick coatings physically cannot replicate. Not a marketing claim, a chemistry claim. The flour isn't filler, it's the nucleation layer that turns ordinary seasoning into something closer to a ceramic shell. 19th century cooks knew this. They wrote it down in the kind of matter-of-fact tone people use for boiling water, because it wasn't a secret then. It was just how you kept iron alive. And then, somewhere between 1960 and 1975, the entire technique fell out of American kitchens almost overnight. Not because a better method replaced it, because a more profitable one did. What you're about to learn is older than the light bulb, cheaper than any seasoning spray, on the shelf, and genuinely, measurably better than what most cast iron enthusiasts are doing on YouTube right now. In 1954, a French engineer named Marc Gregoire sold the first Teflon-coated frying pan, and within about 15 years, the seasoning knowledge that had run American kitchens for a century quietly drained out of them. Think about that timeline. And this, my grandmother, probably yours too, Mac, cooked on cast iron her entire married life without ever once calling it maintenance. It was just the pan. By the time her daughters set up their own kitchens, cast iron had been rebranded as difficult, primitive, a relic for people who hadn't caught up to progress. That rebrand didn't happen by accident. DuPont ran enormous advertising campaigns through the 1960s, positioning Teflon as the liberation of the American housewife. Magazine after magazine, television spot after television spot. The message was consistent. Seasoning was complicated, scrubbing was medieval, and any woman still wrestling with iron was behind the times. Meanwhile, the coated pans themselves were designed around an awkward truth: Teflon scratches. Teflon degrades above around 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Teflon pans have a functional lifespan of roughly 3 to 5 years under normal home use. And then you buy another one, and another. That's not a flaw in the business model. That's the business model. Cast iron, properly seasoned with the old method, doesn't have that lifespan. It has a century, maybe two. There are working Griswold and Wagner pans from the 1890s, still in daily use in American kitchens, and they cook better now than the day they were forged, because seasoning isn't a coating that wears away, it's a surface that deepens. The industry never had to ban the old technique, they just had to stop teaching it. One generation of cookbooks stopped including the flour step. The next generation forgot it had ever existed. By 1985, if you asked a home cook how to season cast iron, you'd get some variation of rub it with oil and bake it, which is the simplified, degraded version of a technique that used to have precision and patience built into it. Eliza Acton was a poet before she was a cook, and in 1845 she did something nearly nobody had bothered to do for home kitchens. She wrote the measurements down. Her book, Modern Cookery for Private Families, is one of the most important English-language cookbooks ever published, and most people who love food have never heard of her. Isabella Beeton, who would become far more famous a decade later, borrowed extensively from Acton's work. The reason Acton matters for what we're doing here is that she documented kitchen practices as they actually existed in the 1840s, before the industrial food system reshaped them and flour-dusted fat treatments appear throughout her pages and throughout her contemporaries' pages as the standard way of caring for iron. The logic of it, if you read between the lines of those old cookbooks, goes like this. A scullery maid or a cook's assistant would rub beef tallow, lard, or sometimes linseed oil into a warm iron pan. Then, and this is the step that disappeared, she would dust it lightly with plain wheat flour, work the flour into the oil until the surface looked like a thin paste, and then set the pan over the hearth until the whole thing turned dark and smooth. The result wasn't black the way modern seasoning is black. It was a deep mahogany, hard as lacquer, and practically impossible to strip without aggressive chemical intervention. Acton's contemporaries across the Atlantic were doing the same thing. American farmhouse manuals from the 1850s and 1860s described nearly identical procedures. The technique shows up in French provincial kitchens, in Scandinavian iron care traditions, in Pennsylvania Dutch household books, convergent practice across 3 continents, all predating any coordinated industry, all arriving at the same answer. That kind of independent convergence is how you know a technique actually works. Nobody was marketing it. Nobody was getting paid to promote it. It simply survived in kitchens because it produced a better pan than the alternatives. What killed it wasn't science, it was convenience language. By the 1950s, cookbook publishers were competing for housewives whose time was suddenly being valorized as a scarce resource, and a 4-step seasoning ritual didn't photograph, as well as a shiny Teflon pan. The flour step got cut first because it looked fussy. Then the precise temperature got vague. Then the whole concept of multiple seasoning layers collapsed into a single sentence buried at the back of the book. By the time Julia Child was on television, cast iron seasoning had already been demoted from common knowledge to folk memory. Heat any cooking oil past its smoke point, and something genuinely strange happens at the molecular level. The oil stops being oil. It starts becoming plastic, not plastic. In the casual sense, plastic in the literal chemical sense, a long-chain polymer network where individual fatty acid molecules have cross-linked into a solid lattice. This process is called polymerization, and it's the entire foundation of cast iron seasoning. When you see that glossy black surface on a well-used skillet, you're not looking at oil. You're looking at the petrified ghost of oil, a thin, incredibly hard layer of carbonized polymer chemically bonded to the iron underneath. Here's where most modern seasoning advice goes wrong. If you heat oil alone, on iron, the polymer layer that forms is thin, uneven, and prone to streaking. It's sticky in the middle of its cure cycle, which is why so many people end up with tacky, gummy pans after following YouTube tutorials. The oil pools. It runs. Gravity pulls it toward the lowest point of the pan, so your seasoning ends up thick in the center and almost absent around the walls. Flour changes that entire dynamic. When you work wheat flour into the oil, the starch granules act as thousands of tiny nucleation sites, anchor points, where the polymerization reaction can begin and hold still. Instead of the oil flowing and pooling, it gets physically suspended in a uniform film across every square millimeter of the pan's surface. As the heat climbs, the starch itself caramelizes and then carbonizes, contributing its own carbon matrix to the final coating. You end up with a composite layer, polymerized fat reinforced by carbonized starch, bonded to iron, uniformly thick, glass smooth. This is why the old pans feel different. If you've ever handled a genuine antique skillet that's been loved for 100 years, you've noticed it. The surface isn't just slick, it's hard. You can scrape a spatula across it aggressively and leave no mark. That's not magic. That's the mechanical difference between a pure oil polymer, softish, rubbery, vulnerable, and a flour-reinforced composite, rigid, dense, bonded. Modern seasoning sprays use propellants and sometimes lecithin, which gives a passable result, but none of them replicate what a starch-fat composite actually does at the molecular level. The industry moved away from the technique before food science journals were mature enough to explain why it worked. And once the technique was gone, there was no financial incentive to rediscover it, because the pans that benefit from it already exist in your pantry and don't require quarterly reapplication. Strip the pan down to raw iron before you start. And I mean actually raw, silver gray, slightly rough to the touch, no brown residue, no flakes. If the pan is new from the factory, most modern cast iron ships, with a pre-seasoning that you'll want to remove for the best result. A self-cleaning oven cycle does this cleanly. So does a vinegar soak, about 1 part white vinegar to 1 part water, left to work for an hour, and then scrubbed with steel wool. Rinse, dry completely over a burner until every drop of water is gone. Water is the enemy here, because any moisture left on bare iron will flash to rust within minutes. With the pan warm to the touch, not hot, just above body temperature, pour in roughly 1 teaspoon of oil. Any neutral high smoke point oil works. Flaxseed is traditional for this method because of its high alpha-linolenic acid content, which polymerizes aggressively, but grapeseed, avocado, or even plain vegetable oil will produce excellent results. Lard and beef tallow were the historical choices, and they still work beautifully. Avoid olive oil, which has too many impurities, and avoid anything with added flavoring. Spread the oil edge to edge with a clean cotton cloth. Now here's the step everyone's been missing. Dust 1. Level teaspoon of all-purpose wheat flour across the oiled surface. Not a tablespoon, not a handful. 1 level teaspoon for a standard 10-inch skillet, adjusted proportionally up or down for other sizes. Work the flour into the oil with the same cloth, moving in tight circles, until the surface looks uniformly dull and pasty. It should not be wet. It should not be dry. It should look like a very thin layer of pale mud. Wipe the pan back aggressively. This is counterintuitive, but critical. You want to remove as much of the flour oil paste as you possibly can. What stays behind, the microscopic film that clings to the iron even after you've scrubbed it off, that's your seasoning layer. Beginners always leave too much on, which is why their pans come out sticky. Invert the pan on the middle rack of your oven, with a foil-lined tray on the rack below to catch any drips. Set the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Bake for 1 full hour. Then turn the oven off and leave the pan inside until it's cooled to room temperature. That slow cool is part of the cure. It lets the polymer lattice settle without thermal shock. Repeat this entire cycle at least 3 times for a new or stripped pan. 4 or 5 cycles if you have the patience. Each layer builds on the last. After the 3rd cycle, you'll start seeing the color shift from dull gray-brown to a deep, reflective mahogany black. After the 5th, the surface will have that glass-hard quality the old pans have, the quality you cannot buy, only build. There's a reason estate sales keep producing 80-year-old Griswold skillets that cook better than anything sitting on a Target shelf. It's not nostalgia, it's not collector mystique. It's that those pans were seasoned during an era when the full technique was still common knowledge, and the coating on them has been deepening for a century. Every meal cooked in a cast iron pan adds another microscopic layer to the seasoning. Every generation that inherits one and keeps using it extends the curve. You now know something most cast iron communities online don't know, and something virtually no one under 40 was taught by their parents. The flour step is real. It's documented in 19th century cookbooks that are still in print if you want to verify every word of this. It works because of chemistry that wasn't formally understood until decades after it fell out of practice. And the reason it disappeared from common use has nothing to do with effectiveness and everything to do with an industry that needed you to replace your cookware every few years instead of passing it to your grandchildren. Try it on one pan, just one. A cheap Lodge skillet is fine. Lodge pans actually respond beautifully to this method once you strip the factory coating. Do the full cycle, 3 rounds minimum, and compare the surface to any pan you've seasoned the oil-only way. You'll feel the difference before you cook the first egg. It's that immediate. If this kind of recovered knowledge is the sort of thing you want more of, the techniques that got edited out of our kitchens by companies that profited from our forgetting, subscribe and you'll catch the next one. I've got a whole list of these. And if you actually try the flour method, come back and tell me what happened. I want to hear from the people who did the work, not just the people who watched the video. Pass this one along to anyone in your family who still has an old skillet sitting in a cabinet somewhere. That pan is waiting to be woken up.